Hey, it's Kaufman is Alive. I look at comic books new and old. Today I'm looking at a new comic book, Absolute Evil #1 by DC Comics. This was a $5.99 32-page book. It's written by Al Ewing. We've got Giuseppe Camuncoli doing the artwork with Stefano Nessi as well. They're on the cover here. Pretty cool cover. We've got actually all the hands of all the villains coming together here, almost like they're forming a league, you might say. And we've got all the heroes from the Absolute Universe down here on the bottom. Little Easter egg, if you notice, all of those pictures are torn except for one, except for Hawkeye's picture there. There are lots of little Easter eggs like that in the plot as well. And I almost think these pictures almost are sort of forming an Omega symbol as well. If you look hard enough. So I like that cover on this. I was not really expecting this issue at all. I wasn't even considering picking it up when it came out, but when I was in the comic shop, actually, there was people talking about it. One of the shop clerks was actually reading it at the time while I was in the book, or while I was in the store. They were reading the book, and I was just told how good it was at the time by them. So I decided to pick it up. The story starts back in 1951, just post-World War II, and I get Watchmen vibes immediately from this story. And we're back learning about some of the Golden Age heroes throughout all this story as well. Hawkeye's turning himself over to the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HAWC, and he's telling him that he'll give up his secret identity and all the information that he knows in order to get the commie rats. Then we flash forward to now, and we get a scene with Oliver Queen. So we meet this Absolute Green Arrow for the first time. And there's actually some really good subversion all throughout this comic in a couple different ways. And one of them is we think we are going to be following him all throughout this issue, like he's going to be the main character. And it turns out that's not what happens at all. There's another good Easter egg too, where he's talking to Roy, who we know in Earth Prime is his sidekick Speedy, or Arsenal as he became known. But Oliver's wanting him to join him here, but Roy doesn't want to help him because he's going after Jubal Slade. And in a nice little bit here, Oliver says, "Look, I told you about his island, right? All those private flights, just kids." So he's obviously like Jeffrey Epstein here in this universe. And he says, because he's bought the cops, Roy, he's bought the courts. The system was built for guys like this. So he's got to do something, and he's going after Jubal Slade. We see he's built this entire setup here with the computer. He's got his own Bond car with an ejectable seat. So Oliver Queen, he is all set and ready to go. And we see Hammond talking to Jubal Slade here, and he's the villain of the Green Lantern books. He's coming to this meeting, and he's pretty arrogant. He's talking down to some of the other employees here, the guys at the door. They're asking him to turn over his phone, and he doesn't want to do it, but he eventually complies because they won't let him in the meeting. And he says he's going to talk to their boss about their attitude. And as soon as he walks into the room, we see his new boss. He says, "Hector Hammond, glad you could finally join us." So we're introduced to this round table, all of the bad guys from all of the Absolute Universe books here, including Ra's al Ghul. We've got the Man Who Never Laughs down here. And Veronica Cale, she introduces herself as National Security Advisor. She's the boss. He tries to order a macchiato, and Ra's al Ghul immediately just shuts him down, saying that if you're not going to be talking business, then you don't need to talk. And no jokes. And we see this guy glare at him. He says, "Agreed, I don't enjoy jokes." And Hammond saying, "Yeah, I know who you are, laughing boy." And then Cale's like, "All right, so we all know who everyone is. Let's get down to business." And we start to see all the history of basically the DC heroes in this universe, and it's a bleak history. We see the Sandman, who's kind of the first one. She says, Wesley Dodds is young, idealistic, romantic. It's hard not to put two and two together. Even before Dodds found shot dead in his Sandman suit, his basement laboratory's been ransacked. Years later, the U.S. military acquires some new and very lethal nerve gas weapons. So he was using a non-lethal version of it as a crime fighter, but the government steals it from him and turns it into this lethal version. And she says that's how they won the war. And then we see Wildcat, and she gives history on Wildcat, and she says he puts on a cat costume, beats the hell out of them, clears his name, calls himself Wildcat, and the neighborhood eats it up. But eventually he's bought out with $50,000, it says tax-free, and that's the end of Wildcat. And then we learn about Iron Monroe. She says, a freak of nature, he could stop a bullet at 50 yards and outrun a locomotive. And he decides he wants to fight a never-ending battle for truth and justice. That never-ending battle seems to involve a lot of socialist meetings, she says. So she's called in before Hawk in a special closed-door meeting, and Monroe refuses to name the names, and so McCarthy calls him a demagogue, and so they turn him into a communist traitor of the Union, basically. And she says within a year he's living lonely in a shack in the Nevada desert and accidentally is targeted for a chemical weapons test. Someone filed the wrong paperwork, apparently, she says. So that's the end of him. And she says that's 3 out of 100 examples throughout history. Individuals who've acted outside the status quo. So we see there is this entire world order that is working to try and suppress all of these vigilantes and heroes from coming to light. But then we find out that the Gateway event happened, and she says it's called that because it took place in Gateway City, and she says it opened up a door of a whole new bag of craziness. So we're introduced to the Tetracide, which is all what happened in Absolute Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman took it down, and she also took control of all the operational command on the scene, she says. And they're trying to figure out why, how she could do all this, how she's so powerful. And she says at the same time, another creature, this one's male, she was melting tanks with its eyes, so she's telling them all about Superman. And she says, this is indicative of a trend. We've got a guy in Gotham City, she says, who's, we think human, but he seems to have built all of his resources into the city itself, it says. And then we see the man who doesn't tell jokes. He goes, he didn't take the money like Iron Monroe did. And if you've been reading Absolute Batman, you saw what happened when he was offered the money by Black Mask. He did originally take it, but eventually used it as a show of rebellion against the Black Mask. So she says, yes, exactly. Unlike Ted Grant, he didn't take the money. And I love the Dark Knight Returns Easter egg on this page, but with the Absolute Batman cape there. And then we see her talking about some of the other heroes here, the Green Lantern, Flash, and even Absolute Martian Manhunter here as well, John Jones, which I don't know how they would know where he is or that there's a Martian somehow communicating with him. So Kale continues. She says the greatest danger they pose is not what they can do, but what they can convince others to do, what they can inspire. So they're trying to suppress any sort of societal rebellion here, and they're just trying to maintain order. She's trying to convince them all that they all need to join forces here and use their resources. But Hammond says no sale. And Ra's al Ghul says, I think this is a good time now, Kale. And she says, me too. Send in Mr. Hall, please. So we see this version of Hawkeye here. I'm thinking it's that original Hawkeye still that we saw back in 1951. Somehow still working for the powers that be. And he throws the body that he has with him on the table, and we see that it's the Green Arrow. He says, questions. So I love the subversion here, where Green Arrow immediately is killed. Ra's al Ghul explaining, we don't handle problems in a month, we handle them in a day. He says, no sitting around a table, no chump change, no games, and no jokes. And I love these faces here too by the artist, especially on like the man who never tells jokes here. He's got some real Japanese inspired faces. Some really great artwork. Even though this entire issue is just talking, there's no real action scenes in here at all. The dialogue, the characterizations, the way the characters are written, just holds my interest throughout this book. It's really well written book by Al Ewing here. And the artwork also keeping me engaged, even though, like I said, there's no action scenes. Some really nicely drawn pages here. So she's saying, call it a demonstration of what power can do for money, what money can do for power. She's trying to convince them all that they all need to work together still, and they're still unconvinced. So the man who never tells jokes asks if he can have the floor. And he goes on to this giant crazy spiel here. And he's saying that everything that they're talking about is proprietary information, so nothing here needs to leave this room. And we see that Brainiac is actually watching through everything that's happening through Ra's al Ghul's glasses here, through the mirrors, because he's actually working with Mirror Master, who's in the shadows in the background here of this panel. So Brainiac watching everything that's going on from afar, and he actually is in league with them. He's on their side. So the man who doesn't laugh here is explaining that they've discovered the Omega particle. He says it's fundamental truths about the world we live in. This particle forms basic building blocks of all creation, and now we know how it behaves, how it reacts, what it reacts to. This particle has a moral dimension, he says. And they go, please tell us your subatomic particle understands good and evil. You can't possibly be serious. And Ra's al Ghul says, no, he doesn't joke. He never jokes. Listen. Some great pages here again. Some awesome faces. And this Joker in this universe, he's all about order. While the Joker in, of course, the Prime Earth is just all about chaos. So I love the juxtaposition here of how everything is reversed in this absolute universe. And we see finally the reveal that they're actually in the Hall of Justice. And the man who doesn't tell jokes is saying he's calling all these heroes anarchists basically, and that they all stand against order. And he says he calls that injustice. So they all, like true bad guys, believe in their cause. They believe that they're all on the side of order and justice. And so he wants to toast to our Justice League, he says. And then we see the great subversion here where this comic pulls a Thunderbolts, and we see that the title of this issue is actually Absolute Justice, not Absolute Evil. So some great subversion there again. And then we get the scene with Brainiac and Mirror Master, and we see that they're working together here. And Mirror Master's the only character from the Prime Earth who's made it over here to this absolute universe. I think besides Booster Gold. But he wants to know how this world reflects onto his world. And so Brainiac says there's someone interesting in your world that you need to take a look at. And he's referring to the Joker. And he says that this Justice League needs one more member for it to be complete. Which takes us to the final scene here where we've got this couple sitting watching the sunset. He says, I can't think of a single thing I want. She says, can't you? Because the children are in bed. Hold that thought, he says, and his phone rings. And we get the final subversive reveal of Lex Luthor here. He's a farm boy in this universe. He says, "This is Lex Luthor speaking. How can I be of help?" And if you notice in the background as well, there's an Omega symbol in the clouds. I really like that touch there. So an awesome issue. Like I said, even though it wasn't an action-packed issue, it was all talky-talky. Had some great reveals in here and really moves the Absolute universe forward. So I definitely recommend picking this issue up. And thanks again for watching. Please subscribe and go read comics.